Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our 2020 Citywide Cranston City Council Candidate Forum. I'm Dan Kittredge, editor of the Cranston Herald. We're sponsoring tonight's event with the Cranston Public Library, and I'd like to thank Library Director Ed Garcia and his staff for making this possible. And forgive us for being a little bit tardy. We had a couple of technical issues that hopefully have all been resolved. We'd love to be doing this event in person, but we're glad to be able to provide a venue for the city's voters to hear from all 6 citywide council candidates at the same time. We're joined tonight by those candidates: Republicans Robert Ferry, Nicole Renzulli, and Don Roach, and Democrats Jessica Marino, Larry Warner, and Dylan Zalazzo. Thanks so much to each of you for participating in tonight's event. This event's format will be pretty simple. Each of the candidates will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement. After that, we will move to a series of questions I've developed with some input from readers, and each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. We'll go in the order in which the candidates appear on the November 3rd ballot: Ferry, Marino, Renzulli, Warner, Roach, Zalazzo, and then reverse that order for each question. It's a snake style format for those who may play fantasy football or something like that. Before we begin, I would note that I've had the privilege of sitting down with each of these 6 candidates for an interview in recent weeks, and you can check out those conversations in full by subscribing to our Radio Beacon podcast. Visit anchor.fm/radio-beacon or find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other platforms. With that, we'll move on to the opening statement, starting with Bob Ferry. I'll be serving as the timer, and I'll signal like so when your time is up or verbally interject as needed. So Bob, after you.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me have the opportunity to be here tonight. My name is Robert Ferry, and I've lived in Cranston for 37 years. I've been married for 40 years, and my wife Denise and I raised 2 children that both attended Cranston Public Schools from grades K through 12, and they both graduated from Cranston West. I have a business degree from the University of Rhode Island and a master's degree in teaching from Johnson & Wales. I am the previous owner of Town Hall Lanes in Johnston, Rhode Island. My platform for City Council is simple. I feel strongly that any city, in order to be successful, finances are the key. If you want to have great schools, good social services, good city services, good police and fire departments, good roads, parks, and if you want to be able to handle COVID-19, finances are the key to your success. I also feel that we have to have the right people in charge. We need to look deep into every department within the city to make sure that we are hiring fairly and diversely. And also, if there are any bad apples within any department, we need to find out who they are, and they have to stop helping everyone else that's trying to be successful. As I travel through the city talking to people and answering my phone, people ask me the same question all the time. Robert Ferry, what do you stand for? So I feel that this is a good opportunity to tell you. I am a moderate Republican that is financially responsible. I am pro-life and I support adoption. I favor some gun ownership, but do not own one. I have 2 gay children that are both married, and I support gay marriage. I support the blue and the red, and I feel that we need to get racism under control in this country. But what I wish for most of all is that for the next 15 days, Donald Trump keeps his mouth shut. Thank you for listening, and vote for Robert Ferry on November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Jessica.
Okay. Thank you for doing this evening. Thank you to the Herald, Dan Kittredge, and thank you for Ed Garcia from the Cranston Public Library. And thank you to all of us candidates and all the public that's tuning in tonight to be informed. My candidacy for Citywide Council is a very simple format. What brings me to the table is the service to our community and standing up for our community, which I have done for the last couple of years on a very regular and frequent basis. My background is that I am a lawyer, and I've been a lawyer for over 20 years, practicing in civil litigation defense work, meaning that I defend everyday people of every walk of life, of every gender, every socioeconomic background, every nationality. And I represent them and advocate for them every day. And that is what I seek to do for all of us as a community. I'm invested in the community in terms of my background. I've lived in Cranston for about 22 years, 5 years on the about 5 years on the eastern side, and about 18 on the western side of Cranston. I have 2 children in the public schools. One is 11 and one is 15, both boys. I've been married for 22 plus years as well. My husband is a blue collar guy, is a small business owner. And we both come from humble beginnings. Both of my parents were immigrants from Italy, and they came here and worked very hard, and I don't take any of that for granted. In terms of my background, through school, all of my education, law school, I worked my way through school, and I take pride in that, in the everyday struggles of families. What I seek to do as our representative is make sure that I listen to our community as I have, and not just vocalize the problems, but work towards solutions, which I've done as a constituent, and will be effective at doing as a representative of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Nicole.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight. Thank you to the library and also to Dan from the Herald and all the other candidates who are here tonight, and to anyone who is watching. My name is Nicole Renzulli, and I'm excited to be here. I was born and raised in Cranston. So I'm your hometown girl. I was a product of Cranston Public Schools. I went to Stone Hill and then Hope Highlands while it was an elementary school, then Western Hills, and I graduated from Cranston West in 2002. I went on to Florida State University, where I graduated early with a degree in English and a minor in communications. I also ran track and cross country there. And I started my career working as a news producer in Florida, and then moved home, and I've had a variety of jobs since then, which has given me the experience of meeting a lot of different people, and I think is pretty unique. So I've worked as a waitress, I've worked for the government in the health insurance department at a pretty high level, and most recently during COVID, when I was quarantined from my coaching job at Cranston West, I helped my husband and his family's business start focusing on COVID related business. So any shields that you see around in restaurants or in barbershops, we are producing those. And it was a really great experience to be innovative and help his family's business stay open, but also help a lot of businesses in Cranston stay open. So that's where I focus on now. But my true calling is coaching young athletes in Cranston. I coach track and cross country for the middle school and the high school, as well as at CLCF, where I'm on the board of directors. I have a wonderful family. They keep me very busy. I have 4-year-old twin girls, and I have a son who is 11 years old, as well as my husband, who works very hard and is also born and raised in Cranston. I am running for city council because with 3 seats open citywide, I thought I would. Ooh, am I too far?
I'm sorry, that's time. I apologize.
Wait, well.
That's time. I apologize.
Okay, that's okay.
Sorry about that. Larry.
Good evening. My name is Larry Warner, and I'm a Democratic candidate for Cranston Citywide Council. And I want to say thank you to the organizers and hosts of tonight's forum, and thank you to my fellow candidates and viewers tonight and in the future. Many people are paying attention to national and state level candidates and politics, which are important because they set the direction and tone of our country and our state. However, local level decision making is where the most immediate impacts of our community and our health are felt and made. As a public health practitioner, leader, and scholar, I know that the policies, budget priorities, zoning regulations, environmental protections, and transparency and engagement with our fellow residents are what have the greatest impact on our health. I currently work at United Way of Rhode Island and lead a team there that's working on issues around housing, education, jobs, and financial stability. And before that, led the healthcare initiative at the Rhode Island Foundation. I've also been a firefighter and EMT in the city of Providence for 15 years and have a public health background from Brown University. I'm also a doctoral candidate for a public health doctorate at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. So I bring to the candidacy for City Council a combined background in public health, public safety, philanthropy, and community development. It's a unique combination of skills and experiences, and one that can only help our city to be stronger. I'm running because of what I said, the importance of local decision-making on factors that create thriving and resilient communities, and because I'm a parent and a husband. I have 2 kids that are currently in Cranston Public Schools and one that graduated from Cranston High School West. And so to ensure a strong and promising future for them, to support and be accessible to the needs of our residents across the city, and to advocate for all of our residents across Cranston, I'm hoping that you'll consider me as one of your choices for Cranston Citywide Council and look forward to tonight's discussion.
Thank you, Larry. Don?
Thanks, Dan. My name is Don Roach, and just want to say thank you to Dan, the library, my fellow candidates. Really excited to be in a crowd of these candidates. We've been campaigning for several months, and I've had a chance at least to get to know some of you better than others, but certainly look at all of your qualifications. And I have to say that I think this field of candidates is the strongest citywide council candidates that I've seen in the past 13 years that I've been a Cranston resident. So I'm really excited to have this discussion tonight. So I was born in Philadelphia, raised in New Jersey. I came to Rhode Island 25 years ago, went to Brown University. I have a degree in political science. My wife is from Rhode Island. All of her family's from Rhode Island. And so we've decided to make our home here. And for the past 13 years, I've lived in Cranston. For 10 years, I lived in the Edgewood community. And for the past 3 years, I've lived in Garden City. And I made a run for city council back in 2010. Worked hard. My favorite part of running was just talking to residents and just learning about their problems, fixing potholes, talking about putting up stop signs. And that's why, I really want to run and be your next citywide city council person, is because I just want to hear from residents and really fight for you and fight for the city. I'll be an accessible candidate. Here's my number. If you can see it, probably can't, but it's 401-545-4637. Send me a text, give me a call, and love to talk to you. I want to be accountable for my votes. I'm going to share my reasoning on why I'm voting for certain things, and get resident input before voting for major ordinance changes. And then lastly, I want to be an advocate. And hopefully tonight, as we go through the discussion, I'll share with you how I plan to do that. But thank you again.
Thank you. And Dylan?
Good evening. Thank you to everyone involved in this debate. Before I begin, I'd just like to take a moment to recognize the passing of Councilman John Lanny, who dedicated so many years of service to this city. My name's Dylan Zalazzo. I live in the Dean Estates neighborhood with my wife, Amanda, and my 2 sons, Jack and Ari, who are 3 and 5 years old. I attended Providence College, where I met my wife and earned a bachelor's degree in local government management, in political science with 2 minors in business administration and public administration. I also hold a master's degree in public affairs, concentrating in local government management from Indiana University. Professionally, I serve as the Director of Administration for the City of Pawtucket under the leadership of Mayor Donald Grebian. I help develop and manage our budget every year. I negotiate our labor agreements with our unions, and I know the ins and outs of local government. I'm running to serve the city of Cranston, and I know that I can make a difference by putting my professional experience to work here for this community. With Mayor Fung term limited and 5 of our 9 city councilors scheduled to be first termers, it's more important than ever that we elect strong, experienced leaders who will be ready from day one. I have experience across all aspects of local government, from economic development to infrastructure improvement, from making neighborhoods safer to holding the line on taxes. I'm ready to serve the Cranston taxpayers from day one because I've spent my entire adult life preparing to do so. I care deeply about helping others, and I will be an advocate for the needs of my neighbors throughout Cranston and be very focused on constituent services issues. Education is a top priority of mine, and I want to help make our schools even better for the future. Schools help make us such a great place to live and raise a family, and we need to prioritize them moving forward in a collaborative manner. It's time to invest in our future, and that starts with education. Together, we have the opportunity to build a better tomorrow for our children, and I'm committed to helping make that a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan. And in keeping with the order, we'll go to you with the first question. Cranston remains under an emergency declaration that was declared in the spring in conjunction with the state. What grade would you give Mayor Fung for his handling of the pandemic locally? And should the council be playing a more active role in the response?
Yeah, I'd give the mayor an A-. I think this is the first time anyone's dealt with this in modern history. I really appreciate all the work that the city workers are doing, police, fire, all the way down. Our teachers especially are doing such great work at home, so and in school, depending on the age bracket. And so I really feel like everybody's pulling their weight. I think the partnership with the state could always be better. And certainly as we move forward, it's a matter of how we work together. So A-. City Council, I think, has taken a supportive role of the mayor, and I appreciate the perspective they've taken.
Thank you, Dylan. And Don would be next.
Sure. I think I'd give the mayor an A grade for his handling of the pandemic. As Dylan said, we're kind of in an unprecedented moment. It's the first time any of us are kind of facing this kind of crisis or situation. But I'd like to kind of speak to the city council in that what I like to do, for me, there's a lot of things that the city council is responsible for directly, and there are things that the city council isn't responsible directly. But I feel like as a city councilman, I really want to be that advocate for people, regardless of if it's something that the city council is directly responsible or not. And in this case, for me, we've got teachers out there who are currently just putting their lives on the line every day, city workers who are also doing the same thing. And I'd like to hear more from them in terms of how are things going for them are they concerned? Certainly I've heard from teachers as I've been on the campaign trail saying they are concerned. Some feel like they don't have all the resources that they need to stay safe, and that concerns me. And so as a city council person, I'd like to make sure that all of our city workers feel safe at work.
Thank you, Don. And I just note I cut out a little bit during your question. If I cut out at any point, I apologize, but I'll try to get back in and rejoin the proceedings. Larry would be up next.
Thank you. I would also say an A-, B+ for a grade. I think that it's certainly hard to benchmark this experience against anything that we've seen in recent history. And so being nimble in the response, being attentive to the needs of different parts of the city, and ensuring that the resources are there to support our residents, our professionals, the city's workforce. That's the key responsibilities of the mayor and the council. I would say that COVID-19 has not only highlighted that there are some structural issues and systemic issues that we need to address as a society, it also demonstrates the importance and benefit of having council members who have public health backgrounds or expertise to help understand, interpret, and even help develop guidelines which can help keep our residents and employees safe. And so that's something that I would be able to contribute to the conversation. But as far as Mayor Fung, I think that he's done a decent job, all things considered.
Thank you. Nicole.
I think Mayor Fung has done an excellent job in this unprecedented situation. I would give him an A. From the beginning, he was very vocal through his use of social media, encouraging the kids of Cranston West to stay home, letting everyone know what was going on when he had to quarantine with his wife. And he was just always present. And I think that's really important in this type of situation. I think also over the last 12 years, he put us in a great situation by building up that rainy day fund, which I hope that, you know, we won't need to use, but as a last resort, that's there for us. The council, I can appreciate that the council continued to meet, especially when state leaders did not. They did it on Zoom, and it was done very well. People were participated fine from the public, and they listened to the public. I would say that I wish we could work closer with the school committee as far as with the reopening of schools. That was a big task for them, and I know that's not really part of exactly what city council does, but I think that aligning with the school committee going forward would be very important for city council with this pandemic and going forward.
Thank you, Nicole. Jessica.
I would say a B plus. This is probably the one question that we can all pretty much agree on. We were and are in unprecedented times. I do think that Mayor Funk did a good job of a local level trying to get the word out. I would agree. Things like when it got out of hand at the local parks, which you couldn't blame people for, it was new to all of us and people wanted to get outside. But things were, you know, the gatherings were too large and there were, you know, the right protections in place and helped to get the word out to stop that kind of thing. The reason why I say B plus is that I would have liked to have seen a little more effort in terms of coordinating with the state and available funds for the schools with the CARES Act and getting the money to them to better prepare. And also with respect to small businesses, perhaps trying to assist them a little more in helping them to stay open and coming up with a little more innovative ideas. But overall, you know, we're all doing the best we can, and you know, I'm pleased overall with the efforts.
Thank you, Jessica. And Bob.
I'd give the mayor an A on his handling of the COVID situation. And mainly because I feel that he was able to get all the departments within the city to cooperate with what he wanted done. And that's a sign of a good leader. Police, fire, schools, administration, everybody was on board with helping him get done what he needed to get done. And the fact that no one's ever really been in a situation like this, I think he did a great job of getting everyone to cooperate. And yeah, I'm sure there's room for some improvement somewhere, but the bottom line is he did a good job. And all police, fire, schools, and all the administration, everyone was right on board with him. And I think we give him an A for being a good leader in that situation.
Thank you, Bob. And we'll go back to you for the second question. It was alluded to earlier that there's going to be a lot of turnover on the next council. There's a lot of experience and institutional knowledge walking out the door. Are there any present or past members of the council or even municipal leaders in other communities that you look to as a model or as someone that you seek to emulate if you're elected to the council?
That's a good question. I've been pretty involved in attending all of the council meetings for almost the last year and a half, 2 years. And I did that because I wanted to see how everyone interacted and how they got things done. And I think that we are going to lose a lot of talent in the council this year. And I mean, we're going to have 5 new council people. We're losing Mike Favicchio. I really admire the way he handles things. He does an excellent job of keeping things under control. I think that Council President Mike Farina runs a great meeting. He keeps everybody in line. He has his homework done. He gets everything done. The meetings run smoothly. When questions are asked, he doesn't have to stop and say, oh, let me look into that. He pretty much is ready to go. I think that Steve Stikos was always well-informed, and we're going to be losing him. You know, Kenny Hopkins is not going to be on the council either. I look up to him. I've been friends with Ken for a long time. I campaigned for him 2 years ago when he ran for council. So we have a lot of good people. I've watched them work. I think I can follow in their footsteps. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Jessica.
Sure. I'm very proud to say that in the last 2 years, when I've been so active as a constituent, that I've seen a big transformation in the council. And they can really pat themselves on the back for being very bipartisan these last couple of years, as opposed to years in the past. And a good part of the reason why I decided to run was because I knew that a respectable councilman like Council President Farina, Councilman Stichels were not going to be running again, and not to forget also Councilman Hopkins for his service. But at the time, initially, he was not going to run for mayor, and then he said that he was. But I knew with them leaving the council, there was a need to have people serving on city council that really looked out for the constituents, kept an ear to the constituents, kept an open mind on issues. And I was concerned as a resident, as were, other neighbors and people I talked to in the community, that with them being off the council, who was going to serve that void? Who was going to fill that void? And that's what I hope to do. I have, in being so active as a constituent, I know, what the job entails. I know what the process is. And I think that we need people to serve on that council who are ready to go, who understand all aspects of the city, are fiscally conservative, and have a mind where you are looking out for what is best for our residents and what is best for the city as a whole, and balancing those interests. And I know how to get that done. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Nicole.
So on the current council, I would really look to Councilman Ed Brady and Chris Poplawskis for their guidance, as they've done a wonderful job as councilmen, voting on both sides of the aisle. Like has been mentioned, I think the bipartisanship of this council has been excellent, and I would be part of that going forward. I would also look to Councilman Hopkins for his guidance and his experience. We have a wonderful working relationship, and I know that I could look to these three people specifically for mentorship. But I've also reached out to Lamis Vargas, to John Donegan for advice and to discuss different things as well. So I think that everyone who remains is a wonderful source of information, and that if everybody works together, we can do a great job moving this council forward, no matter who wins on this slate. I think that everyone wants what's best for Cranston. I know that's what I want, and that I would be working diligently for the constituents with everyone who's on the council, so that we can get things done and get through this pandemic and continue to move forward.
Thank you, Nicole. Larry.
I would say that I look to, from the current serving council members, Steve Stichels, who has been a stalwart on municipal spending, a great watchdog on where the dollar is spent, and making sure that as many resources as can be brought to the table are invested in our schools and other important priorities within the city. Councilwoman Vargas, who is a great advocate on behalf of her ward and has a great commitment to equity. Councilman Donegan, who has modeled excellent community engagement before the pandemic and also during the pandemic. And Councilman Brady, who has been a great example of a bipartisan approach to policymaking. And so I think we have great institutional knowledge that will be retained through those individuals. And then also leveraging our relationships with our General Assembly members who are residents in Cranston, serving Cranston as well, and looking to their experiences in the legislative process, learning from them as well. So that's who I would name as mentors and examples.
Thank you, Larry. Don.
Sure. For me, I would start with Ed Brady and Chris Poplawskis, who I've really gotten to know a lot better over the last several months. And I just love how they represent their communities and really are responsive, common sense, and just regular people. And I hope to emulate that on the city council and be a regular person that you can talk to and come up and speak with, and you'll get your issues heard just like they do. I also really like Council President Farina in terms of he's a very smart guy, very much focused on the issues and moving the council to make very good and smart decisions, regardless of where the source of the recommendation comes from. And I think that oftentimes we get caught up in partisanship. And I like how Council President Farina hasn't done that. And I really respect that and hope to bring that also if I'm elected as well. And then probably last, but certainly not least, Steve Psychos, who defeated me in 2010. I have such great respect and admiration for Steve. We don't always agree on all of the issues, but I hope that if I am elected, that I can serve the residents as he has and fight for them as he has, because he's been a great example of being genuine, sticking to his principles, and doing everything he can to fight for the residents. So those would be the folks that I hope to emulate. And then I also just hope to kind of forge my own path and show the community who I am and what I bring to the table.
Thank you, Don. Dylan.
I'd echo what my fellow candidates have said about the importance of being nonpartisan, working across the aisle. The current and former councilors that I've talked to have stressed that, from Mayor Fung, Maria Bucci, Councilman Santa Maria, hearing many of them talk about the contributions of many of their colleagues in the past, the importance of working together and putting partisan politics aside to get results for the voters is really an important thing to me. Lamas Vargas is a dear friend of mine and somebody I respect a lot, but Republican, Democrat, I think that the contributions of our current councilman can't be overlooked. So Paul McCauley is one in particular who I think was able to bridge partisan divides very well and was always focused on his constituents' needs first. And I certainly hope to emulate that. And then I obviously would like to be nearly as successful as my boss, Mayor Grabian, and a gentleman here in Pawtucket, Councilman John Barry, who's been the City Council's finance chairman for many years, wealth of knowledge and somebody I've learned a lot from. So I would echo the need to be nonpartisan is critical moving forward.
Thanks, Dylan. And we'll go back to you with our third question. Two recent incidents involving pedestrians being struck by vehicles, one on Broad Street and another on Cranston Street, have given new fuel to conversations about speeding and traffic safety in the city. As a council person, what steps would you pursue to address these issues?
Yeah, it's definitely something people are talking about out there. Aqueduct, Mashantucket Valley Parkway in particular. This is a problem in every community, and I think you really have to take an intelligent, comprehensive approach. Work with your police department, work with DPW. There's no one size fits all solution. Every neighborhood and every street has its own intricacies. So in some places, additional speeding enforcement with the police is certainly appropriate. In other places, signage and the like can do the trick. Focusing on things long-term that help reduce the number of cars on the street is also a good alternative. Transit, bike lanes, that involves cooperation with the state, obviously, and something we need to take a long-term view on. I watched the debate recently with Maria Bucci and Councilman Hopkins, and I thought they both had very good ideas as well relative to rumble strips and 3D crosswalks. Those are types of things that we need to be looking at, and I hope to contribute to those conversations. Again, the solutions need to be implemented on a case-by-case basis, and you need to take a data-driven approach to those solutions.
Thank you, Dylan. Don.
Sure. This question is kind of personal to me. When I was 15, my mother was struck by a car as she was walking to a bus stop. And after her death, they added some sidewalks to both sides of the road so that people wouldn't suffer the same fate. And it's very sad what has happened recently. But I would also echo what Dylan said in terms of it's a case by case approach. But what I will say is, I don't know if it's necessary case by case, but throughout the city, there are a lot of sidewalks that are just in bad shape, bad shape. And there's a lot of communities that, some houses have sidewalks, some houses don't. And sometimes kids, especially kids coming from, say, Cranston East, are maybe walking in the middle of the street because they're not trying to walk on people's grass. And even though the property is city property. So honestly, I feel like we're even more accidents waiting to happen. And so I think we've really got to focus on this as a priority because we got to keep residents safe. And we don't want more of this to happen. And in order to do that, we've just got to make it a priority. And so definitely will be a priority for me. I've heard it a lot from residents all across the city. And so we'll definitely figure it out, as there are many different solutions and each case is different.
Thanks, Don. Larry.
I think we've definitely recognized that there's a need to take a citywide approach, a citywide look at traffic engineering needs and understanding what's required to make each of our neighborhoods safer. Speeding is an issue that's come up in conversation across the city, and it looks different in different parts of the city. So what's happening on Narragansett Boulevard looks different than what's happening on Cranston Street or Atwood Avenue. However, the theme is consistent. And so working with our traffic experts, working with our police department and neighboring police departments as well, and ensuring that as we develop solutions to our traffic and pedestrian needs, that we're inclusive of what that means and how we can collaborate with our neighboring municipalities. I'd also say that public transportation, as was mentioned, is something that we need to look at more closely, and developing a more efficient system of routes across the city. If there's, if improving our public transportation system, obviously in partnership with RIPTA and DOT, can help to alleviate the number of cars on the road and make it easier to get from one side of Cranston to the other. That will help overall, and will also contribute to preserving our environment. So looking at solutions that will not only address our traffic and pedestrian needs, but also contribute to preserving our environment is one way to approach the solution.
Thanks, Larry. Nicole.
So I agree that the problems with speeding in different parts of the city need to be looked at individually. But I would say that we can start off by being fiscally responsible and addressing this problem simply by utilizing police cars, not necessarily with people in them, parking them in certain places. I know that if I personally see a police car, my automatic instinct is to slow down. So to start there, and then the rumble strips and the 3D sidewalks, I thought those were, crosswalks are very creative solutions. I would say we should look into grant funding for some of these things, which is, I know grants can sometimes be a Band-Aid, but right now when we're in a situation where, we need money more than ever because of the pandemic, that's something we could look into until we develop a plan going forward. But I think that we should really focus on how we can do this while not spending a ton of money on it, by being creative and working together and taking it, situation by situation.
Thanks, Nicole. Jessica.
Thanks. With respect to the recent tragedies, I can tell you, with my experience as a civil litigation defense attorney, I deal primarily with automobile accident cases, everything from wrongful death, involving pedestrians, to simple automobile accidents. And the unfortunate part is we're never going to be able to prevent it entirely, but there are things that we can do as a city to minimize the risk. In walking the areas and walking the neighborhood and just in living in the city for as long as I have, I know this problem exists on both sides of the city. I mean, where we live years ago, there was a vehicle that flipped over onto its roof because they were traveling so excessively fast. In walking on the eastern part of the city, I saw the vehicles blowing stop signs, speeding, racing down the streets. There is an approach that we need to take as a city, and the police and our public works Public Works Department are the most beneficial tools to have the most direct impact. The police do a very good job at corresponding their response when you have those types of situations. They will increase the police presence. They can't be everywhere every day, but they do that when you see an uptick in terms of those types of incidents. In the Public Works Department, they can help us to prioritize the important areas along with state DOT to make infrastructure improvements in those areas. And there are remedies available. This is not a problem that's unique to Cranston, and the solutions are not unheard of. We can partner together to get that done. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Bob.
Yes, I am an avid cyclist, and speeding and distracted driving are probably my biggest nightmare when I'm on my bicycle. I feel that it is a serious problem, and we need to come up with long-term solutions, and not just, you can call and complain and they'll put a speed trap out for 2 days, and then 2 weeks later, the problem just comes back again. I live on Cranston Street, which is in the middle of an experiment, a traffic study experiment. They've added some traffic calming measures on Cranston Street by putting in the blinking things that tell you what your speed are and everything. And they do work, because when I find myself coming down Cranston Street home and I see that thing flashing that I'm doing 32 and a 25, I immediately slow down. So I think there are a lot of long-term solutions. We just need to figure out how to implement them, how to pay for them, and we really need to look into them. And we have to work with law enforcement to convince them that this is a serious enough problem that it's just going to affect more and more people. And I think it can be solved. We just have to figure out how to do it.
Thanks, Bob. And we'll go back to you for this next question. The current council term has seen ongoing discussions over a number of neighborhood quality of life issues, largely stemming from the impact of commercial operations on residential areas. How would you approach these type of concerns on the council?
Are you speaking of any one item in particular, or just in a general sense?
I mean, in a general sense. I mean, certainly I think yard works comes to mind as maybe the most prominent that's been, but these kind of issues.
I think that currently there are probably 2 or 3 different situations within the city that are upsetting a lot of neighborhood people. And they've come to council to complain about them. And when I first see these things, I always say, they are absolutely right. We need to do something right about it right away, but it's always not as easy to do something about it. Sometimes it's just easier to say we're going to do something about it. I feel that when complaints like this come up, we need to spend a lot of time figuring out how seriously it's affecting people's lives and their way of lives. In some situations, people can't use their swimming pools. They can't keep their windows open, or they can't have a party in their backyard because the noise of the plant that's near them is just too loud. So we need to really make sure that we're paying attention to our constituents and helping them have the quality of life that we're promising them as we run for city office. That we promise them that we're going to do the best we can for them. We have to make sure that we do the best for them. So I do feel that we need to spend a lot of time on these areas.
Thanks, Bob. Jessica.
Dan, I had an audio freeze. Can you repeat the question, please? I didn't hear it.
Oh, certainly. Just a moment.
Thank you.
The current council term has seen ongoing discussions over a number of neighborhood quality of life issues, largely stemming from the impact of commercial operations on residential areas. How would you approach these concerns on the council?
Okay, thank you. I am all too familiar with the balance of residential versus commercial. The solar issue in particular touches upon that precise issue. In addition to that, in being so active, I have had frequent communications with different sections of the city, such as the residents taking up the yard works concern, and the Northeastern Tree. I'm aware of that issue as well. What needs to be done is, it doesn't have to be, and it's not supposed to be, an us versus them type of attitude. I am understanding of businesses and the need to operate. Again, my husband has a small business himself, But just like us as residents, if we want to make an improvement on our home, we need to do what? We need to follow the rules, and we need to, get the permits, follow the rules. The same is true for our commercial partners. There are rules in place, and those rules need to be followed. And if they're not, then we need to have those addressed. And yes, we don't want to, stymie financial development of our commercial partners, but it's not that. The rules are in place. They know the rules when they operate their business, and they need to abide by those rules. Just, as that's true for us as residents. And that's what I would seek to do, is make the rules abundantly clear, utilize our municipal court system that we have in order to enforce those for the protections of our residents. It impacts our property values. It impacts our city as a whole. And we need to make sure that we advocate on behalf of those residents and find solutions. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Nicole?
So like just said, we really need to make the rules clear to both our constituents and the businesses, because I'm sure that people have complaints, but if businesses are operating within the rules, we can listen to those complaints, and we can try to, minimize what is inconveniencing our constituents, and act as a mediator between the businesses and our constituents. But if businesses are not following the rules, then we need to step in and stand up for our constituents. I think that mainly being accessible and available to give information to our constituents, I think that's what a lot of people want. They want to know that they're being heard. And then looking into the complaints and following up, I think that's the most important. But if businesses are not following the rules, then they need to be held accountable for that.
Thanks, Nicole. Larry?
As has already been said, this really boils down to responsible zoning and making sure that residents and businesses are aware of what's required by zoning regulations. We also need to look at our zoning regulations and see if they need to be changed because of how times have changed, and maybe there are industries that are infringing upon the quality of life of our residents that haven't done so in that way before. So I think we do need to look at ensuring that we're enforcing current requirements, revisiting the requirements as appropriate, and then appropriate enforcement as necessary. I'd also add that we need to be accessible to our business and residential constituents so that we can maintain a dialogue and ensure that they're aware that we're attentive to the complaints and concerns, and that we want to operate in the best interests of our businesses and residents. But our residents ultimately are the lifeblood of our community, and so we have to make sure that that we're ensuring a great quality of life for them. We also do need to be consistent, though. One of the things that I've heard that people are frustrated about is how what's good for one person or one business doesn't apply across the board. Sometimes if you know a guy or know a girl, then you might get a nod and a wink and get away with something. And so I think the expectation is that not only are we ensuring that the appropriate regulations are in place and that they're fairly applied, but they're applied consistently. And so that's something that I'm hoping to contribute to through service on the City Council.
Thank you, Larry. Don?
Yeah, Dan, this question, we hear a lot about the quality of life all across the city. And I feel it boils down to we need to have dialogue between business and residents. And I feel like a lot of people in the community just feel like nobody's listening. And I feel like that's a problem. And I feel like we need to have businesses and residents sit down together, have a conversation, and to help facilitate coming to a positive solution. There are probably going to be a lot of cases where residents and even some of the businesses may not be aware of the rules, but we should educate both businesses and residents around the rules. And then also just look at the spirit behind the rules, if those rules need to be changed in order to fit within the confines of the culture of the community. But I think the the main thing for me as a city council person is making sure that our residents are feeling heard and that businesses partner with our residents and know that if things happen and if they occur, that the residents will have a city council person who is going to be knocking on that business's doors and saying, you need to listen to these residents and listen to their concerns.
Thanks, Don. Dylan.
Yeah, you need to listen to the neighbors and understand the entire problem and its root causes. And then you need to go to the business and bring those concerns to the business and try to work collaboratively to solve the problem. Most businesses want to be good neighbors. And so if we can bring people together, that's the most critical way to do it. If we can't get there, code enforcement's critical. I hear from a lot of folks that are frustrated about, tires on the ground and rodent harborage and things of that nature. We need to do as good of a job as possible to make sure that those are getting addressed as quickly as possible. Use the tools in the toolbox that are available now, and then explore potential new ones. So business licensure issues, enforcing stipulations, people need to comply with the rules that are in place. So it's the role of elected officials, if necessary, to hold people accountable. And then, quite frankly, if you need to consider new legislation, I would work with my colleagues in our State House delegation if necessary. Cranston is defined by its excellent quality of life, and it's our obligation to preserve and enhance it whenever possible. That's why people invested here.
Thank you, Dylan. And we'll go back to you for this next question. The city council and mayor are set to see increases in their compensation based on an ordinance that was approved a year ago, or a set of ordinances, I should say. Do you think the increases are warranted, and would you seek to revisit this issue if you're elected?
Prior to the pandemic, I absolutely thought the increases were warranted. I think our mayor and our city council are paid below market, to be honest with you. Currently, though, I think everything's on the table and that absolutely should be revisited. Working here in the city of Pawtucket, we just this week entered our second round of the work share program. We will essentially be furloughing everyone from the mayor and myself on down that's not a public safety employee for Fridays, and City Hall will be closed. So that project will save about $500,000 from now through the end of the calendar year. I think you got to put everything on the table, and certainly the compensation of our elected officials should not be off limits in any way. It probably needs to be the first place we look.
Thanks, Dylan. Don.
Yeah, I would agree that it should be revisited. It's hard. What bothers me a lot about the city, or even across the country, is how many people have lost their jobs. Folks have lost their lives as a result of this pandemic. And, I just worry about that. For me, if I'm elected to the city council, I plan to actually donate my salary to further projects within the city because I want to do my part to help the city. I mean, it's a small part to help the city and find ways to utilize that money to help in different areas within the city, because I'm so concerned about the many folks, especially in the service industry, who have lost their jobs as a result of this pandemic. But I definitely think that we should probably revisit the compensation next year as we kind of face this budget tsunami that we'll need to address in the winter.
Thanks, Don. Larry.
I definitely don't support raising the compensation for the council and the mayor if we're at the same time having a conversation about potentially raising residential taxes. And so I think that while our elected officials do spend a significant amount of time in service to the city and work hard to ensure that the policies and our budget is right for the needs of each community within the city, I think we do have to proceed cautiously and financially frugally if we're still navigating financially uncertain times. And so that's definitely something that I would be willing to revisit. I think the people who are on the front lines in working in our city deserve it first, and would happily revisit making sure that they have a living wage before increasing the compensation of the council or mayor.
Thanks, Larry. Nicole.
So I think prior to the pandemic, we did need raise. Elected officials in Cranston did deserve a raise. If you want to bring in, top talent, you have to be able to pay what they deserve, or you're not going to be able to find the qualified people to do the work. That being said, with the pandemic, I don't think that we can, fairly ask our collective bargaining units to put money back on the table or raise taxes if we're not going to lead by example and also put the money back on the table. So I think this is something that would be revisited, and being a servant leader is not typically about your paycheck. You're doing this to serve your community. So during this pandemic, when people are struggling to put food on the table and keep their homes, I think it's up to us to lead by example and bring that back up.
Thanks, Nicole. Jessica.
Hi. Recently, the council had made those changes before the pandemic hit, where they increased the salary. I know that they did a study to do comparisons with the pay rate, and I understand that the mayor's position entails a lot. I understand city council entails a lot of work. However, it was already my intention, particularly given the pandemic, to donate a portion of my salary as city council to different charitable organizations as well. And if in turn, if I'm fortunate enough to be on the council, I can tell you I'm not going to be voting to increase our pay. I would most definitely consider rolling the pay back, particularly given the pandemic. I understand the initial pay raise too. At those times, the economy was booming and Cranston hadn't seen a raise in a long time. So I understand where that was coming from, but I most definitely think it's crucial that we be responsive to the times. It would be hypocritical, I believe, at least for me, to seek those kinds of additional funds when we're trying to be fiscally responsible as a city. So I would most definitely have no problem rolling it back. No problem at all with that. And the same thing with the mayor's salary. I wouldn't have any problem with that as well, rolling that back. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Bob.
I wish I had 15 minutes to answer this question, because when it came out, I did a lot of research on it and felt very strongly in certain areas of it. I do feel that it needs to be relooked at this time and maybe deferred, but I do not think it should be eliminated. The council and the mayor in Cranston, in comparison to the rest of the state, is very underpaid. I have had people think that council people are going to make $15,000 or $20,000 a year. And when I tell them it's only $6,000, they can't believe that. I'm not doing it for the money. Okay, that's not it. But I think the mayor of a city, second largest city in Rhode Island, should be paid more than $82,000 a year. So because of COVID, I think we should look at maybe deferring that increase or delaying it for 6 months or a year. But I do not think it should be eliminated. And I think the council should get the $2,000 raise, because all in all, like I said before, I'm a member of the Purchasing and Contracts Board. I see the money the city spends, and this is a very small fraction of the total budget. And I do not think that the mayor of the second largest city in Rhode Island should be making only $82,000 a year. That's just my personal feeling, but I do agree it should be deferred until things improve. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. And we'll go back to you for this next question to kind of dove off the point that was made about, spending on these increases during a real difficult financial situation. If you're elected to the council in January, we find ourselves in a situation where there hasn't been more federal stimulus aid, where state aid hasn't come through as anticipated. Are there any particular, tools, such as a supplemental tax increase, that you view right now as being either on or off the table?
I think that the first thing we need to do is to look at every single item and every single budget line by line. And I do this on the Purchasing and Contracts Board. I raise a lot of questions. And the answer is always, it's in the budget. We're going to spend it. It needs to be spent. And my question is always, can we defer it now? Do we have to spend the money now? Is this something that we necessarily have to have right now? I think if we get into a situation where there's going to have to be a supplemental tax increase, the first thing we need to do is have every department throughout the city look at every line of the entire budget and decide whether they really need to spend that money at this time. And from what I've seen over 2 years, I think that we can find a substantial amount of money that does not have to be spent right now. And we can put the money where it's definitely needed. So that would be my opinion on that.
Thanks, Bob. Jessica.
Sure. Right now, the city is holding its own despite the shortcome of the money coming from the state. So that's an encouraging sign. With that being said, I do not want to raise taxes unless absolute last resort. I'm hopeful that we will not have to do that again because we've been able to hold our own so far. And the first approach needs to be us looking at the budget, going department by department and seeing where savings can be had. I'm hopeful that in doing that we're not going to have to be in a position where we're going to need to raise taxes because the burden should not be borne by the residents. And particularly right now where, we're hitting hard economic times. With that being said, I'm not trying to give this false assurance that would never happen. We have to wait and see what happens. We're going to have hard times ahead, and we need to take a close look at the budget line by line, department by department, and see what savings can be made. There's been some talk too of, having like an outside firm come and look at the books. I have to tell you, my hesitancy in that is that that's additional money that the city has to expend, and I don't think that that's necessary. I think that we should be able to handle this on our own, and particularly if we have the right leadership. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Nicole.
So I think that just like I approach it in my own home as a wife and as a mother, when like I tighten my budget. When I was quarantined and didn't get my coaching salary in the spring, I tightened up what we spent. Maybe we didn't need something this month and we didn't spend the money. So like everyone has been saying, we really need to just go line by line and look at each department and what they had originally needed. Perhaps they could do without for a little while. Not everything is essential. So we want to keep essential city services and our residents getting what they need, but we don't want to raise taxes on people, when they may not have a job, when they're looking to pay their mortgage. That's just seems like an awful thing to do during this time. It's heartbreaking what's happening in people's homes and businesses, and to raise taxes on them, if not necessary, doesn't work for me. But we can't leave anything off the table because we don't know the situation that we're in, but that would be a last resort option, in my opinion.
Thanks, Nicole. Larry.
I think we need to look at tools on both the expenses side and the revenue side of the budget. And on the expenses side, closely examining our spending and prioritizing what are our must-have investments versus deferrable investments. Where can we leverage economies of scale and better leverage cross-departmental efficiencies. On the spending, on the revenue side, in order for us to make the turnaround from the economic impact of COVID-19 and related financial challenges, we really need to ensure that we have a thriving commercial small business environment. And that is one of the ways that we can help to offset the tax burden on residents, is by helping to support our small businesses, which are really the backbone of our commercial sector, help providing the resources, the technical assistance, the investments to make sure that they survive, thrive, and rebound. And that will really help to put us on a stronger financial footing. And going back to a point that Jessica made earlier, I think that an area that the city could have done better with navigating the impact of COVID-19 is really supporting our small businesses. And so that's something that we can do on as a council, as a city, to ensure that the burden on residents is minimized.
Thanks, Larry. Don.
Thanks, Dan. I have a master's degree in accounting from Bentley University. I've spent most of my job career in finance and accounting. I work for a Fortune 100 company. I've dealt with budgets upwards of $1 billion. And as I said in my kind of last answer, we're going to be facing a budget tsunami. And so for me, protecting the taxpayer is priority number one for me. And in order to do that, we do have to look at every department is going to have to look at every line item of their expenditures, 100% without a doubt. We've got to look into grants. We've got to try to find any kind of money we can find for the city, whether it's coming from the state, whether it's coming from the federal government. We've got to put in that kind of work. And we're going to need folks on the council who have a background and experience dealing with different accounting situations and issues and know how to manage in an expense environment. And I certainly can do that. And so from a supplemental tax increase, that would be the absolute last resort. It has to be on the table, but for me, it is the bottom of the list, last resort, because residents are saying that they cannot afford another tax increase, and so that would be how I would choose to solve this problem.
Thanks, Don. And Dylan.
Thanks, Dan. I'm a definitive no on a supplemental tax increase. We cannot be raising taxes on people while they're out of work or their businesses are closed due to this pandemic. That's the approach we took in my day job in Pawtucket, and I applaud Mayor Fung and the current city council for holding the line on taxes this year. I won't turn away from that policy direction. The city has no control over what the state and federal government does. As a result, cities and towns have to focus on what they can control and take a conservative approach. The city should be, and I'm sure Mayor Fung is, looking at proactive strategic cuts in spending to offset the significant downward pressures in revenues. In my day job this week, as I mentioned before, we began our second round of work share. For the next 11 weeks, we'll be closing City Hall on Fridays, and that will save the taxpayers $500,000 while avoiding layoffs and other more draconian cuts. That's what's right for taxpayers, and it takes a shared sacrifice. It can't just be on the taxpayers every time. And if that means that the council's raises or anything else has to be on the table, that's where we go. In a related matter, we need to look much more closely at our budget, revenues and expenditures. In 2019, fiscal year 2019, which is the most recent audited budget, the city ran a near $2 million deficit, and that was in good times. What did we do then? We did not raise taxes. We hit the rainy day fund. Why would we raise taxes now while people are struggling when we didn't do it in good times? Our city leaders have to be even more vigilant now with the virus than they were before to make sure that spending does not outpace revenues. Thank you.
Thanks, Dylan. We said we'd go 90 minutes. I know we were a few minutes late, so I think I can squeeze in at least one more question, maybe 1.5. So we'll go to you for this next one. We've seen some troubling trends lately in Rhode Island's COVID-19 data, and I think it's safe to say that some social distancing restrictions, whatever form they take, will be in place when the next council term begins in January. How do you think the council should approach public meetings going forward?
Yeah, I think the Zoom has been incredibly effective, and I think the work that the clerk's office has done collaboratively with their colleagues throughout the state, including the clerk's office here in Pawtucket, to learn the functionalities of the system is really improving. And so I think right now there's no need with the numbers continuing to increase to try to force public meetings to be back in confined spaces with poor ventilation. So I support the Zoom meetings as the numbers tick down. Yes, I'd love to be back in person. That's when you get your best interaction with people, as well as your colleagues in government. And so I support getting back as quickly as safely, but right now it's not safe.
Thanks, Dylan. Don.
Sure. I definitely support Zoom meetings. We've been out, all of us have been out campaigning, going door to door. And some residents, I've been invited into people's houses. Some residents also just don't open their doors. And so part of me says is, what do we have to have a one size fits all? Or would it be possible to have some people on Zoom and some people actually in council chambers? I think part of me would prefer that approach, because I feel like this pandemic has taken over our lives in a way, and it has. And I'd like to get to some sort of normalcy in a way, almost like go from defense to offense. But I know that for myself, my kids are doing distance learning. Others are choosing that option as well, but others are choosing to go out and social distance appropriately. And I would love to find a way if we could do both.
Thanks, Don. Larry.
Thank you, Dan. I think what we found is that technology has been frustrating because we've become overly reliant on it because of COVID-19, but it's also allowed our public meetings to be accessible in a way that they weren't before. And so I do think that whatever the timeline is to return to in-person meetings, we should retain, or we should keep in mind, how do we keep the process open and accessible to average residents? I do think we need to balance our sense of, or our desire to return to a sense of normalcy with maintaining a safe approach for us, or for those who are elected to city council, and for the residents who want to participate. And so I don't think we should rush to reopen the city council chambers and create an unsafe environment. I know that City Hall could probably use some upgrades itself to make sure that it's up to date and safe. And so I think that we do need to be mindful of the health implications of returning to an in-person environment too soon, especially when the numbers are on the uptick, as you noted, Dan. And so just being mindful of that, I think we should tread carefully and cautiously and lead by example as well. If we're asking our kids to learn in a distance learning environment and our teachers are teaching in a distance learning environment, why would we put ourselves in harm's way unnecessarily and too soon?
Thank you, Larry. Nicole.
So I think that we could take a hybrid approach here, just like we have with schools. And I personally think that the city council should be in chambers. They should be there safely, wearing masks, if they need plexiglass, if they're distanced 6 feet apart. But for any council member who does not feel comfortable, that's their own decision. And I think they could be home or in their office on Zoom. I think the public should continue to be on Zoom. That's a greater population. So they should not be in chambers. But I think that the council needs to be in chambers to show that they are there doing work, just like I think that the General Assembly needs to go back to work. I think also the Zoom is great and it's been fantastic. A lot of people have said how they've gotten to attend the meetings that they previously weren't able to attend. But I think we need to better educate the community how they can get on the Zoom. I think we need to have a more transparent system and some guidelines up on the website to make it easier for people who don't use this technology all the time. Because it's one thing to have it available and it's another thing to tell people how to use it. I think that's very important.
Thanks, Nicole. Jessica.
Sure. I see this as basically making lemonade out of our lemons. As being a frequent flyer over the years, in attendance at these meetings and in running for city council and knocking on doors, there's been a change that I see that we can say is for the better. One is that we are now making it a priority as a city, something simple as technology improvements. I mean, we're in 2020. I'll be the first to admit, I'm not a big social media user. I'm, a little lax in using technology, but we have to come up with the times. It's important for city council to be able to implement that, and we can get our voice heard, and it can be more expansive and touch more people and encourage more constituents to be active. And so I think it's been a great step in that direction by us doing that. And I think that on a go forward basis, once this clears, most definitely we should go back in chambers and people should be in attendance. That is the preferred method, but we can also expand upon that and make sure that we live stream. The city does now have the YouTube channel as well, where we can store the videos so people can access these if they were not able to meet it. Not able to attend. And the other thing I would say is that in knocking on doors, people have expressed frustration because they say, look, I can't go in chambers and they can't see me and it doesn't have the same impact. But we need to do a better job as a city communicating to these residents that the host, the city council, knows how many people are on that call. We may not be able to see it as a resident, but the city council, in fact, does know. And so their voices are still being heard. Our city representatives know that they are being active, and it does have an impact. Maybe we as the city council might be able to communicate that better to the residents, and they can even call in with the phone. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. And Bob.
I think going forward, we do have to offer both in-person and Zoom to the public if they want to attend a meeting. I don't know if any of you have remember some of the times when there's something going on in chambers where there's awards being handed out, or a team may have won a championship, and you walk into that chambers and there's like 150 people in there, and it's a very uncomfortable thing. So we have to be able to offer both to people, especially because of COVID. But I think we need to have the technology to do that. I remember times when they don't even have an LED projector for the zoning department to show plans for things. So we have to take the time and spend the money to get the technology updated enough so we can offer the public a chance to attend the meeting from home. And I think that's the way it's going to be from this point on. So I'd like to see it be phased back in person, but not where there's like 100 people in that room ever again, personally.
Thanks, Bob. We're right up against it. I want to try to squeeze this last one in, but we'll leave it to 1 minute each, if that's okay. We started the night with a question about the mayor's handling with the pandemic. The city's electing a new mayor for the first time in 12 years. How would you rate the mayor's tenure overall?
Mayor Fung's tenure?
Yes.
Well, I've lived in the city for 37 years, and I think for the past 12 years, he's done an excellent job in many, many categories. He's held the line on taxes. He's kept the services pretty good. And there's been times when I haven't agreed with him on everything, but overall, I give the mayor a good grade. He's done an excellent job. I think the person that takes over from this point on, if it wasn't for COVID, they would have been in a very good position to continue going forward and keep his legacy going. But overall, I think the mayor's done an excellent job. I think our police and fire teams are strong. I think our schools are in pretty good shape. They might need a little more funding, but overall, I think we've done a great job. He's done a great job. Thanks,
Bob. Jessica.
Yes, I think overall Mayor Fung has done a good job. We've kept stable funding in the rainy day fund. We've improved our bond rating. So I think that's been commendable. The schools, I agree, do need more funding, and hopefully we're heading in that direction. The one area of improvement, I would say, and being truthfully candid and having knocked on a lot of doors, is one thing that's come up quite a bit is that they're a little disappointed, and some residents feel as though the mayor hasn't been as actively involved as he had in years past. They noticed a change, and I'm just being completely honest, and that's what I've heard on knocking on doors, and I have to agree a little bit with that. I don't think he's been as active in terms of speaking and communicating with the residents as he had in the past, and that's a little disappointing. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Nicole.
I think that Mayor Fung has done an excellent job as mayor. And when I knock on doors, I have most people saying the same thing. He has brought Republicans and Democrats together. A lot of people love Mayor Fung. And he started when we were on the brink of financial ruin and has made us one of the 50 best cities in America to live in. We have a fully replenished rainy day fund to access if needed. And on top of that, I can say that Mayor Fung, he's everywhere. He's accessible. You see him at the ball fields, you see him at school events. But he is there working hard in City Hall to make Cranston a great place to live. And, he's a likable guy. He's done everything for this city to make us a great place to live. And I hope that I can personally be part of the team that continues his legacy going forward.
Thanks, Nicole. Larry.
Thank you, Dan. I would agree that overall, I think Mayor Fung has done a pretty good job for his term in office. And the city is still a great place to live. And I've lived in Cranston for the entirety of his terms in office. Significant number of people.
Larry, you're freezing on my screen. I'm not sure.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, sorry about that.
No.
I think that there's a significant number of people who feel like the current administration has left them behind, and whether it's because they feel like heavily Democratic neighborhoods have found their voices fallen on deaf ears at City Hall, or just they don't get the same attention as other parts of the city. I think there's enough people looking for a different experience that we can't just copy and paste the Mayor Fung experience into the new administration. I think we do need to take the good, and there's been a lot of good, but I think we also need to think about the unique needs of each part of our city and build on the successes that we've had, address the challenges, and continue to build a strong Cranston.
Thanks, Larry. Don.
Sure. I think I'm a very much a fan of Mayor Fung's. I think he has been the best civil servant that I've ever had to, be around in my entire life in terms of what he has been able to do for the city. He came into a budget crisis and he had to raise taxes, and I say this all the time, he sent letters to property tax, people who pay property tax, and explained, here's why I'm doing what I'm doing. He kept his promises. He was able to work with unions. He, has revitalized many different areas of the city. Hasn't hit them all, but that's what I'm hoping to do in terms of continuing his legacy. But I think in terms of what we can do for the city and who we can emulate, I think Alan Fung is a very, very good example of what we can do and the type of politicians we can be.
Thanks, Don. And Dylan.
Yeah, Mayor Fung's built a very strong fiscal foundation for us to build on. And it's been my pleasure to work with him with the League of Cities and Towns on a number of issues. So I have the utmost respect for what Mayor Fung's done and the direction we're going. And I'm proud of the opportunity to hopefully help move the city forward as he moves on to other things.
Thank you, Dylan. Thank you all so much. I'd love to squeeze in another question, but I think we're out of time. So I really appreciate all taking part tonight, and best of luck on the trail. I think having sat down and spoken with you all and based on tonight's event, I think the city is fortunate to have a really strong crowd of candidates. So thank you. Good luck in November, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you.
Stan.